Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote I picked for this podcast. There's one person that I'm curious to their thoughts on this. It's our guest. Here it is. I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on, I can't believe you. Friedrich Nietzsche.
It's a good quote.
Our guest, Chris, welcome back. Be My Neighbor, founder, and so many other things. I'm going to save all that so I can get inside your mind, which I really respect. That's where I really respect you. You're a man of action in my view. Episode 108 of the Culture Matters podcast. Anyone listening to this, go check out that episode. I picked that quote because I was looking for a Nietzsche quote, because when I think of you, I think of will to power. I just think of, I think strength. But yeah, I'm curious. Well, first, thanks for coming back.
Oh, dude, thanks for having me. It's always a ball.
And I was listening to our last episode, which I implore the guests to go and listen to that. It'll be a very different conversation, I'm sure, but it's deep. So I'm curious. I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on, I can't believe you. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, when you said that, I think about the times that I've been lied to and how I've been lied to about things and what the real damage was. And I think it's a great thing for all of us to consider. It's not the mistakes that we make that represent the true cost of the mistake itself, right? Everything has a cost to it on this earth. I would argue that with anybody. And with a lie or, deceiving anybody, when you realize what you're giving up into the future outside of whatever the potential gain was in that moment, is it worth it, right? Should we be a little more careful about the actions that we should and should not take that would cause us to lose value with our friends, with our family, with our peers, with the people in the industries that we work in, that we see every day, and not be short-sighted on those choices for the now value of things that we're looking for, but understanding what the true and long-term costs of our actions actually are.
I was introspecting, why am I feel called to ask you about this quote? Because I was looking through these Nietzsche quotes, trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. And I think it was because I listened to our last podcast and what you had to say about culture and just how you expressed your views of culture, just real unique in a way that I agree with. Where do you think your understanding awareness, maybe understanding of people, of bringing people together? I mean, big shout out to VA, everything that you guys do to bring people together. Why do you understand that so well? Because in my opinion, you do.
Probably because I've made more mistakes with it than most people have. I've been a part of some incredibly strong cultures. I've been a part of some big communities that had no culture. I've been responsible for my actions specifically eroding and degrading the culture that I wanted to be true around me. I think failure is often the best teacher. And I would say that in reflecting on choices I've made and directions I've moved in and what the true cost of those have been at certain points in time, I've realized what's most valuable. When you think of something like culture, we talked about this actually today on our nonprofit call for VA. We got our nonprofit stood up now, right?
Oh, wow. Congrats. Hold on. I just lost your audio for a second there. Not sure. Did you knock something over? Sometimes that could.
So on the call with our board members about our nonprofit, we were talking about culture. On our company call this morning, we were talking about culture. Both companies are in the process of growing, both Be My Neighbor and VA. And we were talking about what culture is and why they think we have strong culture. I think culture is best defined as a byproduct. I think if you set out to create culture, that you need to understand that it's a result of a whole lot of things, time, distance, and direction to get to. And it's not something that you just install immediately. It's not true until it's multiplied, right? Until you have a lot of believers moving in the right direction, the same direction, on the same mission, even if they're completely different types of people. But then you also have to have an understanding of liberty in the sense that culture doesn't have to mean that everyone's identically the same. And it shouldn't mean that, actually. It takes a lot of difference in a community to create amazing culture, right? So I think my background with cultures, I mean, I would say the Marine Corps is probably one of the strongest cultures I've been a part of. And what I saw that made it successful with vastly different types of individual humans that are all great at certain things. I mean, there's a firmness to what the mission is and how everyone should move, but there's also a fairness in the sense of people still get to be who they are, right? As a part of that. And that's where you get the strength of it. When people feel that liberty, when they feel that resolve to move in the same direction, not because they're being forced, but because they want to, you get this left hand serving the right and scratching the back. And you know what I mean? You have all of these different body parts moving and functioning together. And the desire for that to exist amongst all of those people who have their own ability to decide in each circumstance, right? That's what truly, I think, creates a culture and allows it to grow and infect other people close to it.
Yeah. What's your take on people, on employees thinking for themselves?
I think it's a thing where I think a bigger a company gets, the less they want that in certain cases. But I think it's a necessity. Like, how boring would it be if there were 50 Christophers? And that wouldn't be boring. That would be miserable, right? But I think everyone has to think for themselves. But if they're all thinking for themselves to move in different directions without an understanding of a unified mission or front, then what good is it, right? You're fragmented and you can't accomplish things because team is always more powerful than self. And so I think it's incredibly important that each individual understand that they're responsible for reasoning through problems on their own, but holding it accountable to the reason why they're in community wherever they're at.
What's your mission at this point, and has it evolved since we spoke last?
I would say for me, mission's a fragmented thing. I've got a lot of missions, man. Who knows how long I'll be here, right? I could die in a month, like die in a year, have a heart problem at 40.
Right on this podcast, it still go
Right.
out.
You're not promised anything. And so for me, I'm always balancing what my mission is with what my priorities are. I have a lot of things that I would like to achieve, but I would say for the last 6 months, one of my bigger missions has been supporting my wife in her new venture, her family and her creator, mom and sister rather, a wine business. And it takes a lot of time and she's having to put in tons of hours, and I'm folding laundry and cleaning floors and running kids around, doing Mr. Mom stuff while I'm still managing the other things that I'm responsible for. Right. But it was one of those pieces where, like, what's my mission? Well, I think I lost track of it because I got so busy in certain things, but my goal was never to be a billionaire. My goal wasn't to create the biggest veteran community or the biggest mortgage company or the biggest meat processing plant. My goal was to be a husband and a father for 80 years, right? What would it take to ensure that in a world that just doesn't value marriage anymore? It seems more of a contract between people than a covenant between people. And if you don't know the difference of a covenant and a contract, I would encourage you to look that up, especially if you're married. Marriage should be a covenant. And so for me,
I'm gonna look that up right now. I think that's valuable. Wow.
yeah, check it out, read it out loud in a second.
As you were
But for
saying,
me,
sorry, I think I
no,
should
you're
look it up though
you're
for
fine.
the audience.
You know how we do this. It's like a rock band jam, man. But for me, my mission is to be the best husband, the best father that I can be, while recognizing that I have jobs, roles, and responsibilities in order to provide for and take care of those that I'm responsible for. And balancing those things is something that's never perfect. You have to crack some eggs and make some mistakes, I think, to realize and see what you should be focused on. But my mission right now is to ensure that I don't drop any balls, that things keep moving forward. But my priority of family, of marriage, is the first and foremost thing in my mind at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. And that's the one thing I can't lose ground on.
Well, I want to ask you about, and just have this in your head because I'm going to read these two definitions for it. Can we even have a culture without that rooted in the family?
I don't think
Um,
so. I think that's a big reason why you see a lot of degradation of the family unit. I think that's a lot of, you look back through history, and you're a big history buff. What happens when governments start separating and segmenting families and running, the thought of heritage and oral histories about where people come from? There's only one
omnipotent
reason.
government.
Yeah, there's only one reason they do that, right? And that's because the state wants to become mom and dad, right? At the end of the
Wow.
day, if everyone's different, then how can you treat everyone the same? Every family needs to be different. Every family needs to be focused on, what their stories are. I think without strong family in the US, I don't think the US would have grown as it did, right?
Hmm.
And for me, it has to be a priority. If a lot of professionals are going through hard times right now, right? It's a hard market. Markets are hard on
Yeah, I
family.
want to unpack that because even the last time we spoke, it seemed like we were going into the storm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm curious to unpack your thoughts on that. But before we do that, this contract, the covenant. So I just looked up the contract definition, right? Which is, basically a written or spoken agreement concerning, it says like employment, sales, tenancy, enforceable by law. But then so okay, enforceable by law. Then I looked up the covenant, and if I click it under the theological concept, is how I'm hearing that, an agreement which brings about a relationship between God and his people. So now, if I'm listening to what you're saying, and critique me if I'm missing this. There's one relationship between me and the state, or me and the paper, or me and someone else. There's another relationship between me and the Almighty. Like, is that the distinction between covenant and contract? Because I could rip up a contract between me and somebody else. What's it matter? Like a business, in business all the time. It's like, oh, if I don't get caught, it didn't happen. Well, I mean, what does that mean?
Well, they're
So
both
I
root
guess I'm going down a tangent, but
the
like
root of
basically,
both are, I think, they're rooted in agreements on something. But the difference, I think, in a covenant, it's a promise. It's perpetual. It isn't something that has clauses for outs. It's not something that is designed to be broken or
Mhm.
nullified at some point. A covenant, I think when I have my kids, I made a covenant to love them, to protect them, to always look after for them, to be present. And it's not something that once you make a covenant, I don't think it's something that you take back. I think that there should be things in our lives that we establish as this is a forever thing, right? And I think with families, especially,
Wow.
I think it's incredibly important to understand the difference between a contract and a covenant, and to decide if you're willing to make a covenant before you start to have families. Because the reality is, marriage ain't easy, kids ain't easy. I mean, I know work and jobs aren't easy, but you want to have someone that's a high performer go to garbage in a heartbeat. Watch their family fall apart behind the scene because they disrespected their priorities, and see what happens in their life after that. They say the fastest way to go from a billionaire to a millionaire is get a divorce,
Mm.
right? I think for me, it is a spiritual background. I think the covenants that I have that were given to me, and that's the difference too. They're usually covenants, I think, are usually more one-sided. It's a promise to another, and it's something that person has the ability to determine in each step if it's true or not, right? I made a covenant to my family, and my covenant has to supersede all of the other things that are managed by contracts in my life. And the two are not the same. One's perpetual, the other one has clauses and outs and can be broken, right? And I think it's important that we all understand the difference between a covenant and a contract in our life, and that we decide what's worthy of a covenant versus a contract.
I think from a cultural perspective, it's healthy to even dwell on this for a moment, because if I'm self-reflect, I spend a lot of time, maybe not using the language you're using, but thinking the difference between, conscience or my word and what that means in the world, in my life. It, in all contexts. And of course, big with business, because how do you have a culture without that? Well, I don't think it's possible. I think I can have a cult, though, or an ideology or something like you articulated earlier, something created with intention that will, create consequences proportional to my ability to keep my word or reveal my word in action. But this covenant contract idea, like there's the materialism, there's the factual ism of business. And then there's something else. I don't know. I'm curious what you think of that topic, I guess. General theme of leadership or
I think
business
leaders make
mindset.
covenants with the people that serve the leader's interests and that are giving away part of their dream to be a part of someone else's. And so as a leader, if you make a contract with people, those things can change. They time out, they phase out, whatever else. And it's more of a business approach. A covenant's much more personal. It's very intimate. And when people see you as someone who they say things like, they're true to their word, or they're still doing the thing that they always said that they were going to do, and they haven't changed that, right? Those types of things build a trust and rapport with the people it takes to follow you, to execute on your vision if it's larger than yourself. And if those people know and believe that everything's just a temporary contract that can be changed for whatever reason without conversation or anything, then what faith can they place in what you're saying? It gets back to your quote. It's not that you lied to me that hurts me. It's just that I can never trust you again. And I think that's what happens when you break contracts, or certainly when you break a covenant. But people need to be able to rely upon their leaders to move in the directions that they all set out for. And further, an understanding change happens, right? Whether it's a business or marriage or any of those things where you make a covenant, when change occurs, there has to be a dialogue around it. It's like, listen, we need to have a dialogue here because we were set in this direction. And there was this major change that none of us could prevent, none of us could anticipate. And because of that, we need to alter the direction slightly. A covenant necessitates that a dialogue occurs and that mutual liberty behind choice occurs again to reestablish, right? Or reaffirm rather the covenant in place about what everyone's mutually doing together.
Oh,
Whereas
like you mean
contract,
in the sense that because it's greater than if there's no out, we have to talk.
yeah,
Like I think of this in business all the time. If I'm going to grow with the people, I'm going to grow with the people that I choose to be in the boat in. We're going to go through like storms, but if we can get through the storms, how could that not be more valuable than just replacing that relationship and starting all over, whether in a storm or in the, like I think about it all the time from a business standpoint. With those that we able to serve and work with, it's like if we can continue to grow and continue to learn. So yeah, I'm curious what you think about that, because that just hit me. Like the covenant means, I love this. You're forced to talk about it and work it out because you can't go anywhere. But the contract, you could just forget the person, whatever, let the lawyers handle it. Like we see that in business all the time. So yeah, what do you think of that? That came to my mind. Like you have to, is that what you're saying? You have to talk, you have to work it out, you have to grow through it. If it's like non-negotiable, you can't get out of it.
I think that's exactly it. And I probably place covenant mentality on a lot of relationships and business practices that really probably are better served contractually, which may or may not be wrong. I'll tell you in 20 years, you know what I mean? But at the same time, it establishes a trust with people, especially the people that are with me, and an accountability with them where they know, even if I'm leading something, I'm accountable to the same thing that they are. And that's the relationship that we have, what we're trying to accomplish mutually, the respect, the work, the effort, the don't do's, like all of those things are valid, and either party can raise them as grievances. And ultimately, if you see relationships, each relationship that you have is a covenant relationship, when should you stop forgiving or when should you stop serving that relationship? Well, it's like, well, if you made the covenant, then you can't. Or that wasn't really a covenant. You still don't, you don't know what that is. But I think that's what's really cool about marriages that go through incredibly difficult hardships, and you see them 30, 40 years later, and they've been through stuff that you hear their story and you're like, oh my God, how did y'all work that out? And it's like, well, Two people decided not to say no. There were problems and we worked through those. And you need that type of atmosphere, whether it's in the home or in the business. You need people to feel like that they have that type of authority to accountability, that everybody's subscribed to themselves, right? And so I think that's the way that I approach relationships, or the reason why I approach relationships that way, because it removes my ability to let pride, ego, emotion, failure cause a disruption to the tenure of the thing that I'm trying to accomplish with whomever it is that I'm in a covenant type relationship with.
How does pride come before the fall?
Yeah, this one's I could write a book on that one, right? Feelings are the biggest liars on earth. Your feelings lie to you. They tell you that in a moment, something's true, when in reality, at the macro side of that, if you step back and look at it all, it may be true for half a second, but who doesn't fail for those periods of time? It doesn't make a larger belief untrue. And we all get to decide what we believe, right? And I think that's the difference in the covenant versus contract. It's like failure doesn't necessitate a disruption or a breaking up of everything. It should reaffirm and establish our mutual agreement to move in the same direction, to be bound to one another, to work together, right? And I know in business, it's not life or, till death do us part, right? With every single person that's a part of it. But wouldn't it be cool if we all felt that way about the people we worked with and served with? That's what it was in the Marine Corps. Like, hey, you could ask some of the guys that covered up a grenade when they roll in the wrong foxhole. Why? Because I love the person to my left and right. And that was, it was my feet. I don't know why. I didn't have time to think about it. But my love necessitated that belly down. You have to serve and be willing to serve the people that are around you truly, even when that means a great cost to you, or else it's all superficial. What's it for?
Do you think at some level, the value of covenant to you has navigated itself in integrating, and this is just my observation, integrating veterans and professionals?
Yeah, that one took a lot, because with Vet VA specifically, if it was just about money or self or pride, there were plenty of things I could have done differently to gain more in all of those categories. But it wasn't that. It was, how do you take a bunch of independent individuals all over the place, unite them to a cause that they believe just as much as you believe, and that even when there's breakdown or problems or big things that cause disruption for periods of time, the first love, the first truth doesn't become untrue later, right? You work through it and you get past it because everyone was mutually obligated to that thing. It mattered to them that much. How do you create something like that? That VA was only going to be a success if each person lifted that up and carried their portion of it and was unrelenting in their willingness to, or resolve to not put it down, right? We can understand failure and we can see past that, right? Marriages go through infidelity and make it through those things, a huge betrayal of trust, right? Why are they able to do that? Well, I think that's the difference between a covenant and a contract. A contract says, hey, there was a failure here, it's time to break it. A covenant says, hey, there was a failure here, we need to sit down, we need to talk through this, and we need to figure out how we can continue to move, right? And so I think it's important that we look at our lives and realize and see the places that really we should strive to have covenant relationships, even if imperfectly, right? Nothing's ever perfect, especially coming from humans. But I think it's important to strive towards perfection.
This covenant over contract, I'll call it culture. You think there's an advantage in a time of conflict like this, macro wise?
I do. I think that it's a huge morale builder. So we went through a really hard mortgage period, right? And for the large part, it's still not what it was in 2021, 19, like those years, right? So we got to the beginning of the year, the leadership at Be My Neighbor, and we had an important decision to make. We bled through Q4. We had a lot of personnel, right? And they aren't just employees. They're people that we love, that we care for, that we ask if we know they're about their families. And so we had to make a decision on the leadership side. Well, what do? We're bleeding like everybody's bleeding. What do we value more? what will the people that remain see us choose as the thing that we value more? So we shut down all of our compensation for about a quarter, a little over a quarter, to ensure that we maintained a covenant relationship with all of those people that work with us, work for us, to achieve a mutual goal, right? And that's a great experience for a homeowner. A lot of our originators ask, like, how do y'all find operational people that care so much? Well, because they see that we care. We talk about caring. We talk about what mutual service looks like and why we should choose it and why it matters. And, not just doing a mortgage, but potentially impacting someone's generational family tree like mine. That's my story, right?
Wow.
So they see you make choices that, I would say, reiterate the culture that you're trying to establish. And they recognize that your commitment to them isn't just contractual. You didn't get to a point it's like, hey, I know this was the deal, but the deal's changed. Pray I don't alter it again, right? That doesn't beget a bunch of trust from people that are believing in your dream and helping you build it, even if they get to become a part of it, right? And so I think that's how the whole covenant mentality is present in my mortgage business, for sure, is in the dedication that we have to the people that believe in our beliefs, right? That believe in our dreams, that are part of, and a major part of how we can even achieve those dreams, because without them, you're limited, right? But they have to believe, right? It's like, what's the show? I forget the name now. The sign "Believe" on the wall.
I haven't watched TV in years.
He's a soccer player, coach.
Ted Lasso or something.
Ted Lasso. There we go. That's the one I was
watches that, I think.
You almost have to have this like corny, fictitious, like, how can they be that? How can they really like be that devoted? And well, you just choose to. That's it. Marriages that make 80 years, it's simple. It happens because two people decided not to say no, not to quit. That's it. Doesn't matter what they go through. Doesn't matter how high their highs were, how low their lows were. It was a firm commitment. It was a covenant because they said so. And how many times can you make what you said true, right? Not lying, basically.
What is your advice around business partnerships?
Yeah, I got some really great advice from some very capable business owners that I know, and that was never go into partnerships. And I went just the opposite direction. I love partners.
Yeah, you're a partner guy.
I am. I don't have one business that I own by myself. And the business that I did own by myself, I brought partners into. And I think that's because no man is an island, no woman is an island. We weren't created to be alone. As much as I like dream about the whole disappearing into the mountains, and I would go nuts. Like, give me a month up there. And I've seen guys in the mountains by themselves for 30 days. You go a little nuts, right? You're talking to trees, talking to horses. But people weren't created to be in isolation. That's why solitary confinement is a tool, right? People are community creatures, and we need community. And for me, the things that limit me have nothing to do, well, this skill set isn't strong enough yet. It's that weakness is never going to be that strong. And so how do I supplant my weaknesses with people that have strengths and are devoted to carrying out, from at least a leadership or a partner position, the same thing? Because I can't be anywhere. I want to do a lot of different things before my life is through. And and my last meal wouldn't be a steak. It would be a buffet. I would have 50 different types of food, right? And that's the way I want to live too. I want to live with a bunch of different experiences, and I want to try different things. And I don't want to be alone in those things. And that's not much fun, right? And so when it comes to partners, I pick people, or I find people that I feel like have a covenant level commitment. And it's not a contract level commitment, right? But I want people that truly believe and are willing to go through the hardest of hard times together with an understanding and goal of, hey, look, we both get blown up, but I'm in the truck, let's go, right? Like, you have to have that level of, I think, commitment in order to make it through the challenges that you're going to inevitably face. Every business goes through them, right? No one has this perfect swan song of, we open the doors and billionaire. We're there. Yeah. And it was super easy and there was no challenges, right? But to find people that are that devoted to something or committed to something, you usually have to find people that have experienced hardship and breakup and loss when it wasn't present to appreciate it.
Makes me think of entitlement. What do you think of that word and that what that
I
does?
don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm entitled to. Like, if anything, if I'm truly like weighing out the things I'm entitled to, like an early death, lots of ridicule, like I've wronged and made statements and done things that I shouldn't have done or were poor choices at the time. And if it's simply a binary thing of you deserve or don't deserve, who's perfect? Right. So as soon as you're imperfect, that business contract necessitate, like you have, well, you're not perfect. Time to move on. Right. I don't know where else I was going to go with that.
Well,
But
you think what's the impact of entitlement on cultures? Do you think?
again, back to the word entitlement. That's, I know where I was going to go with it. Entitlement's such a selfish word. It's defined by everything's about self. It's what you've done, what you deserve, what entitled. I don't like the word entitlement just because it's incredibly selfish. It respects no one but self and what is deserved or owed or all of these things. And I think it it fails to reflect upon the wrongs or the failures or the falling shorts, whatever they are that each person has in their life, right? Entitlement, like who's it? You know what you're entitled to? You're entitled to die one day. There you go.
Mm.
That's about all I feel entitled to in this life. I'm entitled to die. It may be
How do you
taxes.
how do you define that's fun, responsibility, or how do you view it?
Yeah, responsibility is one that one's grown. I would say I'm 37. I've got 3 daughters, been married for about 16 years.
Wow.
Through some different hardships in business and family and the marriage, right? If something's a 0.5% my fault and 99.5% another person's fault, if I'm the leader, then I'm responsible for the failure, regardless of the breakdown doesn't matter. If I do nothing wrong and there's failure behind me with my people, it's my fault. I'm responsible for it. And so I think to be a good leader, you must accept fully the word responsibility and what it means to you, to what it gives you power and authority. If you're responsible for something, then ultimately you have the power to fix it. You're looked at as a person to fix it. And if you want to fix problems, especially as a business leader, then you have to have that authority yielded to you from everyone that's a part of the belief. And if you fail to be responsible in those things, if you point fingers at other people or you find fault with other people to validate or to show why this issue happened and to negate your responsibility and accepting and acknowledging, hey, this one's on me, it was my team, whatever. I don't think that you'll ever be a great leader. And you learn that in the Marine Corps too, for what it's worth. Like you have a platoon of guys and gals you're responsible for, and they go out on a Friday night and they get in a fight and they get drunk, get in a fight, wreck a car. And it's like, you're called into the office on Monday to report to the CEO because it's your platoon. And it's like, listen, sir, I
Wow.
told them, don't get drunk, don't get in fights, don't wreck cars. And what did these knuckleheads do? They did it. But I told them it's not my fault. It doesn't work that way in the Marine Corps. You're responsible in any of the military. You're responsible for the actions of the people that you're leading, regardless of whether it was a direct violation of an order you gave, you're still responsible for it. And so to get people to accept that on an individual level, it's not just something for leaders, it's something for all of us as humans. We have to learn to accept the responsibility for our actions, because if we don't, the only thing that we're doing is we're making ourselves victims in our own minds, and the outcomes of events we have no power or authority to manage or change. And if you get to a place in your life where you don't feel like you have the power or authority to change where you're headed, there's nothing like more hopeless, I think, as a 37-year-old guy that I've gone through. It sucks to feel like you're just floating down the river of whatever comes next and you can do nothing about it.
This is interesting. I've never heard it quite described this way. The leader in you said platoon or
or any
cadre,
unit. Yeah.
If their people don't let's say they break whatever they said, no matter what, they're going to be penalized. The onus falls on them. You think that that's a way for, or that basically impels or inspires the action of that leader figuring out how to influence, how to navigate those relationships, to essentially earn through the interactions that role? Because I would think that if they didn't get penalized, or I want to play the other side of it, if their leader took what they said as fact, well, then who's going to make those people responsible? Like, I would say that would break down the whole system over time. Like, I don't know, I'm curious why you think that is. Because it's my first thought comes to mind, that maybe that forces that person to figure out how to get that influence, or
how to
develop
inspire people to choose a thing and hold it as valuable without forcing them or dictating that they have to choose, right? It's not just rank that military leadership's about. It's causing a leader to have to self-reflect on what could I have done, even if there's only like one possible thing that I could have done better to make this outcome different. What could I have done? And so you stay in that place of exactly that raw honesty with yourself. What could I have done differently? Even if all of the things weren't your fault, it's like, how could I have influenced this differently or inspired differently so that we didn't arrive at this failure? And then to self-reflect on that. And the next time you run into something, put those things in place. How can you help to create a better outcome that you can't control, right? But you can certainly inspire and lead people to make better choices, or to make better choices about the responsibilities that they have to understand. Like, if you respect everyone's individual liberty and their ability to decide and reason for themselves, and you can't control all of their actions, then how do you inspire them to hold this thing true and evident above all else, right? And that leaders go through that process of what could I have done better, I think probably better than followers do, right? And I think it's really important that leaders self-reflect and admit to all of their failures as their own if it happens behind them, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make them better.
Even that question, right? What could I have done? It's an open question.
It is.
Would you say, is that humility? What is that? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think it definitely
What
ties into
values?
it's the opposite of pride and ego, right? So humility would probably be a great word to use to describe what gives a person the ability to look at a situation that they didn't have their personal failure in, but they're still responsible for, and say, what could I have done different? And that's the humility of it all, right? None of us really
It
can
makes me
control
think of
much.
like problem solving or thinking rather. As opposed to, now I'll use what you said, pride. If that's the opposite of humility in this case, that's like thought. It's past tense. Is it really useful anymore? Is that it's like been used up, right? It's old news or old information. I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that. And it's like open versus closed,
Yeah, I think leaders can't be selfish. Leaders eat last. There's all kind of books written on it. And I think ultimately pride is selfishness. It's validated with feelings that speak untruths to you. And if you're going to be humble or have humility about failures that occur that you've decided you have to be responsible for, then you have to be vulnerable enough to say, what could I have done different? Like, I don't like this. I don't feel like it's valid that this is my fault, but I'm responsible still. And what could I have done different? You have to be vulnerable with yourself, and you have to be self-aware enough to recognize when the pride and the ego and the selfishness of thought comes in, so that you can keep everybody in community and covenant.
I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I can't be self-aware without my enemy.
Yeah.
Because meaning whoever the critic is, because it's like without them, I just have the concept of myself of what I see of myself. It's like without my enemy, without my critic, I don't know Or, I mean,
Your
it's like that. I'm curious what you think of this.
your
philosophically.
enemies
You're
will
the-
show you your biggest deficiencies,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm trying to get at,
And you
right? Like,
people should be like, there's something biblical too, right? You should pray for your enemies, kind of a thing. Your enemies will show you the things that you have not overcome as a human yet, right? They'll show you the flaws that you have that if you can solve, everybody that is a part of your community will be better off for it if you're humble enough to consider those things, right? Like, why is this person's comments or this company's actions towards us, why is it causing me to emote the way that I am, right? Why am I feeling this way? And how is that driving my actions? And if I didn't feel first, what would I decide differently? If it wasn't about validating my feelings and these selfish things, and it was instead about how do we maintain community and how do we achieve the result, regardless of the external influences that we have to face in obstacle form, an enemy, a market enemy, whatever that is, right? And what do those things reveal about myself that maybe I'm not wanting to see yet because I'm defensive, or I'm still a little bit prideful in places. I think your enemies are your best friends in the sense that they will reveal to you the things that you most need to work on.
Powerful. Yeah, and it's like, I'm curious what you think of this idea. If we don't have a problem to solve, we're going to find an enemy to fight. But there's like this regressive nature to that I've observed in different mediums, even different sectors, obviously, like people.
Careful of the individual that always has to be at war, that always has to have an enemy to fight, because they're not free. They're
And I don't think their
beholden.
people can be free either.
No, they can't. And just like you said, if there's not an enemy, we'll create one because that's going to keep us all moving and motivated, right? Like,
it's dark energy. Dark energy.
Enemies, wars, those shouldn't be the things that drive you. I'm guilty of this one really bad. Like, you want to see me in my best performing moments, still probably give me an enemy, give me a war.
Well, hey, shoot. I mean, you had to protect. I mean, I think about this a lot. Like, in some way we have to pay respect to our veterans because they signed a contract to protect us. I mean, like, that's a pretty serious commitment of the body. And then the question becomes, what does that do to the, in your language, the covenant? I don't know. I don't know what the ramifications of that are. Like, I don't even know why I think about these things, but I think about these things. Actually, probably because I was going to sign up for the military when I was 18, and my uncle, convinced me not to do it because I was lost and I was looking for, well, I'm still lost in many ways, but I was looking for my identity, and maybe that's why I think about it. But like, that's a pretty serious investment that's everything. Well, maybe not everything. I mean, I guess depending on what one.
You're giving up
What do you think?
liberties.
I'm going down a like a rabbit hole all of a sudden. See, obviously you sparked something in me.
When you make a commitment that you're forced to keep, even when you don't want to, that's the gray area between contract and covenant, because covenants happen here. That's the only place they happen, because there are going to be days where you don't want to.
In your
meet that
soul,
obligation.
in your spirit.
Yes, exactly. They happen
as an individual.
Yes, each individual decides what they're going to have covenant relationships or commitments that go much further than contracts, and they get to decide every second if that's true or not. And it's not one or two failures in moments where the thing you chose made that untrue that determines it's a failure. It's what do you do next, right? You have to be willing to take it up every moment of the day, your commitment, that is, and prove it true. And let your actions be the evidence that everyone sees to decide if what you believe is true, right? It's an age-old saying of like, I'm going to use my faith on this one. Like, if I say I'm a Christian, is there enough evidence to convict me? Or my actions are evidence for others to see and decide and believe? And am I giving enough evidence to convict me completely guilty of the thing that I want to be true? Am I a selfless leader and my servant leader? Do my people that follow me, get to see enough things where I choose community over self, where there are clear points where I could have chosen self instead, because they're the ones that get to decide whether it's true or not. Right? You can believe whatever you want in your own head, and there are plenty of times where you need to, don't get me wrong. But the evidence that you leave through your actions will determine whether or not you're guilty of the thing that you want to be true about yourself.
That's always brought me to this, and with that, right? Let's say I earn that admixture of belief and trust. I think of belief as like, all right, I think I believe in what this person said. So now there's a space between my belief, our interaction that led to that, whether we met or not, or I perceived them, and then whatever they do to fulfill that belief, like the doing this and would lead to the trust. Like there's a difference between belief and trust, I think. So let's say that you've earned my trust. We have this relationship where what you've said and what I thought, then you fulfilled upon what you said and what I thought in action, and now I trust you. There's a power that comes with that. That ultimately, if you build so much trust with me, I might worship you. So like secularly, I've come to this idea that I got to figure out at some point, I got to like throw them. I got to just like I got to believe. I'm talking about the internal now, because like if I believe in a person, like someone's earned my trust at such a deep level, if I worship them, I'm putting too much on them in a sense. It's like they're gonna let me down.
Yeah, you're disrespecting their humanity. Trust can be lost just as fast as it's earned. Right? You can earn trust a billion different times. And I hate the past tense word earned, because is it what's really ever earned, especially with regarding trust? And when you have 10 things a day that determine the level of trust that's believed in you, someone can trust you, but you can invalidate that trust in the drop of a hat. And sure, they can see.
Yeah, like trust is past tense in a sense, because it was what was done.
It was earned. It was always what's really earned. That disrespects the present and the future.
Oh, are you saying that the earning is more like a self-glorification in a sense, self-projection, like the fact that I think you can earn it, that's me being a little bit too controlling. Is that what you mean in a sense? I don't know. I'm trying to understand.
I think it gets back to the whole selfishness thing with entitlement. Like if I've earned something, I feel entitled to it. I'm selfish in the sense that it's all about me and I've earned it, right? When the reality is, if you're in community with people, are you ever done earning?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's a very important point to make. Are you ever done earning it? How could you be? Right. Every day you wake up and you have to earn it again, in a sense.
You do, especially where it comes to people, because people understand the nature of people. And at times, even the best people choose poorly. They choose selfishly, they choose emotionally, they choose historically. But those choices become selfish in nature. And what does that do to someone's belief in you then, and what you're going to choose the next time? It's not that you lied to me that hurt me, it's that I can never trust you again. Right. And so it's all of those choices and some total
he said,
on the day that you die.
So I just want to be clear. It's not that you lied to me. It's that I can't believe you.
Right.
I don't know if that necessarily means trust you again.
Well, if I can't believe you, I mean, I get where you're coming from there. Belief's a powerful thing, right? We all choose what we believe, even in moments where there's no rational reason to give us validation to why we believe that way, but we still get to choose beliefs, right? Your body of work to any moment in time can propel you a pretty good ways, but but can you do something in that moment to completely disprove all of those other choices that you made?
I think about that every day.
Yeah. And that's why I'm thankful for my faith, honestly, because it's a covenant relationship that understands that I'm going to fail at the things that I shouldn't be failing at, or that I should be growing at, right? But at the end of the day, the covenant's not broken because of my failure, right?
Chris, thanks for this coaching session.
I would hardly call it that.
You're the man. what an enjoyable, I didn't even realize the time. I wanted to ask you about the mortgage business. But I think, wait, but ultimately we have talked about that, because the way I look at it is, or this is my interpretation, uh, it's more than just a deed and and title and a contract to pay someone else back. It's a sanctuary. It's a line in the sand. It's me saying, I'm going to keep my word. I'm going to procreate and burden the consequences of never being able to take that back. And maybe, to procreate, I would need a partner, and like basically it's culture in my, it's identity, it's meaning, it's the whole thing. I think we have talked about mortgages the whole time because, yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. Just thanks for coming on and talking about mortgages this whole time. This was great.
Right. This one went a little differently than what I thought. When you said that, though, in the beginning, that quote, I thought, oh, that's pretty apropos. I enjoy the dialogues because it's in the details that we really define who we are. And our failures don't define us. The present is the present is the present. And each time I said that, it was a new present, right? And then now they're all past moments. And so it's what I say in the future next, in that present moment, it's going to validate who I am internally, how I see myself, how others see me, what I can accomplish, what I can't accomplish. And if you're never done, then you don't get to take a day off on your character. You don't get to, do any of y'all want to go to your grave with an asterisk by your name? Like, he was the greatest, but, or he was the best at this, but, like, no one wants that but after, in their eulogy. And so I think recognizing you have to prove the things that you want to be true about yourself to you in each moment. And if you do that, it empowers you and it'll compel you forward, and it'll give you belief in moments where no one else is going to believe in you. Nothing else is validating the belief that you have, but you know it to be true because everything that you're doing is dedicated to it. How do you make it through really hard times like this mortgage environment? Well, take one more step, prove it true again. Now prove it true again, right? Over and over and over. Prove your beliefs by providing enough evidence to yourself as much as other people.